in Second Life, and Becky Adams from the University of New Mexico, and former K-12 teacher as well. And I wanted to share with you my research, which was done a few years ago regarding using online for professional development for teachers. For a while, I was thinking that my research was getting out of date, but after my experience helping university professors move to teaching online and my work here in Second Life with professional communities, I believe that how to effectively provide professional development, PD, and education is still a pressing and critical issue, and we aren't there yet. So I'm the former director of online course development at UNM. Was there back in the day whenever online was just a few classes, and as I was leaving, I retired recently, we had about 1,400 courses. So professional development was very important there. But first I'm going to talk about our K-12, my study with the K-12 folks. I believe that how to effectively provide professional development in education is a present and critical issue, and we aren't there yet, as I mentioned. As a matter of fact, as I looked to see current research on PD, I found an article from 2019 that voiced exactly my findings and why we need to use them. So in spite of time going by, we still don't seem to be implementing what we know to work. Some things are being implemented, thank goodness, but with this in mind, I'd like to share my research in online professional development in K-12 and how I believe it can inform our support for professional development and communities of practice, both in higher ed and here in virtual worlds. And then hopefully we can all figure out how to get it implemented. My study used qualitative research methodology for a case study of 8 elementary school teachers from one school site over the course of one school year. These teachers, out of the goodness of their hearts and the desire to be better teachers, joined our study of an online professional development initiative. Part of their frustration was trying to be better teachers while juggling the demands of small children and other family responsibilities. I think many of you can relate. But first, I would like to see what your experience is. So let's see if we can just jump out and use some technology here. So I'd like you to use Poll Everywhere, and I'll give you the link in just a sec, and answer the question, what word comes to mind when you think of professional development? In our first question, please feel free to use other people's words, as this is a word cloud and should show some variety, but also agreement. So please go to Poll Everywhere, and here it is on the, and Val Librarian will be watching the chat for me a little bit in case I miss something. So how does the study help you? What word comes to mind when you think of professional development? Thank you. So certification, ignored, ideas, networking, continuing, important. So you're sharing that similar things that we are hearing from, that we heard from our teachers. Actually, community outreach conferences, education, collaboration, networking, your big words were growth and skills, and certainly that's what professional development should be, isn't it? There's a lot of research on professional development, and much of it came from the 90s and earlier, and is still being used. Becky is one of the more common people we trust, and he found that Active professional development requires adequate time for educators to acquire, practice, and reflect on new concepts and skills in collaboration with colleagues. Because time for these types of activities is not normally integrated into the regular school day, school leaders must consider various strategies to make such time available. This was in 1998, and now most school districts are usually adding days to the school year, yet we still hear teachers complaining about professional development. Many teachers are accustomed to professional development that is driven by people they never see, who seem far removed from classrooms and the needs and desires of classroom educators. In fact, much staff development is removed from teachers' needs. Teachers are accustomed to professional development that, as one of my colleagues shared, has been driven by everything but our needs and desires. Jolie agreed, and he said, given that their voices, this means teachers, that voices are not generally heeded during PD, teachers rightly question their investment in programs that are built behind their backs, yet are aimed at changing the way they do things. So this means it must be relevant. We're going to skip the poll everywhere, but let's still answer the question. We can just answer it here if you don't mind. Oh, thanks, Val. Val, do you mind giving that to Blue? Thank you. So how relevant has your professional development been? 50-50, okay. Some relevant, some highly irrelevant. I think that's my experience. PD I received in retail work is much more effective than anything from an education. Wow, okay, good point. Usually it's more skills-based, so here's how you do stuff. Here's how you interact with your customer. So those that are satisfied, it's been self-driven, so that's interesting. And there's a good point, so they don't pay for your PD, so you don't do it as much because you're busy. It's become in demand recently, hugely, hasn't it? And I also have done a lot of PD. Yes, hot, burning hot. Oh, that's interesting, Sensi. So if it isn't measured by administration, then it doesn't often seem like it's relevant. So I have to say that my teachers said it needed to impact their classroom, which we all agree. And professional assistance, that's professional development, I think, don't you think, Sally? It is certainly my hope that we've learned to make professional development relevant in the past few years, and I think we are improving on that. So let me share a little bit of what our research was, what the research is. So research also indicates that successful teacher professional development activities extend over time, interesting, and encourage the development of collaborative learning communities, where teachers can share experience, discourse, and active learning approaches with colleagues as they explore new strategies for teaching and learning. Teachers are often frustrated by lack of support from other teachers or administrators when they are willing to try out new approaches. These sacrifices are disproportionate to the gains and cause frustration. Because I had been an online student and a designer at the time, it seemed perfect for PD in our study. Online learning offers opportunities to support diverse learners in school settings when teachers become the learners. It would seem that an online approach would be a convenient environment. Online would assist in meeting the challenges that teachers face in order to participate in effective professional development. The online environment can be set up to support each of these areas for participants as e-learning extends beyond access to information and builds on communicative and interactive features. Many of you are online folks. You certainly can relate to this, I'm sure. Participants can be engaged in collegial learning through discussions, chats, and problem-based exercises, and then transfer the new ideas to classroom strategies while enjoying collaboration that has otherwise been a challenge in this profession. In my own personal experience of PD, it was a day or two of concentrated information given by a guest speaker in our library. I was interested in anything that would help my teaching, so I took pages of notes, highlighted important elements of any handouts, and listened intently, as did all the other teachers around me that were good teachers. I would go over how the information would work in my classroom and think about how can I implement this. However, when the PD winded up, I would head down the hall to my classroom, and most of the time I would be caught by a parent or a colleague with a pressing issue before I could even get there. By the time I got back to my classroom, I would stack my PD information neatly on my desk where I would see it when I finished attending to this hall conversation. When classes resumed, I would move the PD stack over to the side of my desk, hoping to get to it soon. As things came up, I would often think about how the information from the professional development could help. The next week, the stack would be moved to an important place in the closet so that I could get to it next week. And finally, it would find its way up to the top of my PD box, soon tucked away where I kept it to get to it next summer. If there was something the district required from it, I would certainly implement it to the best of my ability and recollection, but usually the meat of our PD was filed away with the best of intentions. And I think you can relate. I don't think I'm the only one that this has happened to. As a matter of fact, most of my colleagues say the same thing. We have good intentions. So as Fullen and Hargraves say in front of you, professional isolation of teachers inhibits several areas of professional development opportunity, including access to new ideas and better solutions. This inhibition drives their stress inward and causes it to fester and accumulate. And I believe this is not just K-12 teachers. I think this is many, many instructors and trainers across the world, maybe other professions as well. Coincidentally, this isolation causes the good work that teachers are doing to go unrecognized and not appropriately applauded. Finally, it allows incompetence to exist without being seen, to the detriment of students. They believe that for deep and lasting change, efforts for improvement in professional development should be more than just more resources and support of interpersonal relationships. I'm not sure what those hyphens, where they came from. These efforts should include construction of meaningful knowledge in the context of work, including sharing, observation, and focused reflective inquiry. As the teachers volunteered for the study, it was great to find that we had teachers from every grade level, but one, which was kindergarten. I felt that this enhanced the study because their topic was differentiated instruction, and that can be varied with different ages. Also, they were not colleagues that worked side by side every day, so I felt it added to the study. We started the online PD with a face-to-face session. The teachers were given their choice of what they wanted to study, but after a couple of weeks, they all decided to do the district-wide topic of DI. This became very helpful later, as it turned out. I took the district materials and divided them out over several weeks. I had readings to do and resources for them to look at. Each teacher was asked to lead the group in a rotating cycle, and I was the facilitator leader. There was an assignment rotation that included reading current material on the subject, posting 2 concepts that they deemed were significant, and responding to 2 other concepts. Does this remind you of your online classes? I plan to develop scenarios based on their experience relating to the problem of study DI, when the teachers could work with the group to solve a real-life scenario by utilizing what they had learned. Interestingly, as the study progressed, this process was adapted to their preferences and needs, and the scenario was not needed because they were using their classrooms and students authentically in the practice of DI. So we just use their real life experiences. Okay, we're not going to use poll everywhere, but we will answer. I would like you to share again. So how does your PD directly affect your yearly evaluation? And does it make a difference to you? And I will tell you that my teachers worked on their yearly evaluation at the same time. Our study was intended to last the whole first semester. You might find this interesting. But after a couple of months, partly due to the demands of beginning of the year and then the December responsibilities for grade school teachers, which are huge. We always dreaded December. The teachers asked if we could make it continue over the rest of the year. Rather than getting through the materials in a few weeks, they were trying things out, talking about the results in real time and making adjustments as they shared with each other. Isn't that interesting? We used a pre-course survey to measure attitudes toward PD and interest, experience, and attitudes toward online learning. It was used as a post-survey at the end of the year. And let's not forget that question. There were individual interviews and focus group. The district materials included a classroom practice inventory that measured changes in attitudes about DI and practice with DI for the teachers' classrooms. Teachers also kept a record of when they logged into the course. The LMS also tracked data on where in the course they spent their time. And finally, the teachers were asked to keep a reflection journal, and that was used to help them complete their yearly evaluation portfolio at the end of the year. Our results were interesting. Teachers thought they would work on the course at school, the PD course, but 85% of the time, it turns out they accessed it from home. 5 of the 8 said they primarily worked on it late at night when the kids were tucked in bed and the house was quiet. There was a significant change in attitude about PD. So as you can see, they said, I find online professional development to be socially engaging. And I believe this learning opportunity has affected my classroom. Wow, that's the whole point. And they reported they spent more time than they had anticipated. I'm not sure it was my work. I think the online environment really offered this for them. Well, thank you. So our results got even better. Our post-inventory increased. Remember, this is their attitude towards DI and implementation. Of the 119 items that they answered, they increased significantly in 108 of them. Oh, and they do too, but they just don't do it because they weren't given the opportunity, and they got to work with each other, remember, at night, or at least they felt like it because they were answering discussions. Again, online can be a great answer. They found professional development engaging. They spent more time on it than they thought they would because they became close colleagues as they worked through how the DI approach could be used in their classroom. Remember, these are teachers that are generally isolated. Thank you. They changed their teaching and their students benefited. That's the big deal. Another interesting tidbit was that DI was being taught by the district instructional coach to the entire staff at the same time that we were doing our study. And yes, close colleagues is essential. But remember, they really didn't work with each other before this started. So the the instructional coach used bi-weekly staff meetings for her to have 30 minutes to work with all the teachers on the staff. The instructional coach was interested, thank you, Rini. The instructional coach was interested in our study and approach, so she joined our online class as an observer. By December, the time she had at the staff meetings had eroded to 10 minutes and often less, due to the demands of important items that needed to be shared with the staff by the principal and others. So her 30 minutes kept getting eroded away. Many weeks she didn't have any time. It's pretty typical, I think. So she asked my study teachers if they would teach the rest of the staff because they already were understanding DI. I'm so proud of that. As one of the professors of our university said, we had solved all the problems of teacher PD: time, access, isolation, motivation, and results in the classroom. So our results were online was an effective environment for professional development. Setting it up to happen over time was critically important. The PD was highly interactive. The teachers applied their PD. They implemented change in their classrooms. The PD was meaningful to them and had continuity, so it was happening over time. It was convenient, so they could do it around their schedules and their responsibilities. And it was really just giving them the tools to be able to work together, figure it out, try it, and change their practice. It's so simple. They did the work. An anecdotal finding that came at the end of the study was that they wanted to continue at the end of the year. They wanted to go to the next year. So remember, we were going to do it for a semester, then we did it for a year, and now they wanted to continue the next year. I was so pleased to hear that. And someone from the group volunteered to help facilitate because I was not at the school and needed to move on. I helped get everything set up and they started the following fall. Unfortunately, it really didn't go anywhere. With reflection, we realized that it is key to have a leader. A leader who will help with the participants with timing, responsibilities, deadline, and a motivation to follow through. Interesting that with all the benefits, they still needed someone to lead. I think that is just fascinating. And I've seen it happen since then quite a bit. They don't need just somebody to set things up and facilitate it because that's what the other teacher did. They need someone with some passion and motivation themselves. And so I believe this is one of the key findings for those of us who want to support PD and communities of practice. An engaged leader is important. So does this inform our universities and professional communities and virtual worlds? Oh, absolutely, it can be. I think that it helped that I wasn't involved in their evaluation. I'll be honest with you. I think that them not having to, yes, and being able to trust me and be able to speak honestly, absolutely. So how does this inform us for universities and professional development communities here in virtual worlds? Because I was the director for online course development at the University of New Mexico, we were responsible for faculty being able to develop their online courses. Similar to the last few weeks that we've all experienced, most were told to move their courses online rather than it being their choice. So they were being dragged into the online world. You've experienced that, I'm sure. In line with the success we had with this study, UNM implemented a community of practice approach and developed workshops that brought instructors together to talk about individual topics that they were facing with teaching online. We had no authority and all the responsibility. I'm sure many of you can relate to that as well. So we weren't able to make them come to an online meeting. They were used to meeting face-to-face. And so we realized we needed to start there. Our attendance improved drastically whenever we had whenever we changed our approach. We started with having a speaker or an open conversation, and very few attended. So to get them to come, we personally invited them individually to share their approaches with a theme that we were talking about, and we gave them 5 minutes. They often brought a friend, and this helped build our group because they had some responsibility with the meeting. Soon after that, our provost asked us to get a group of online instructors to develop and implement a rubric for what online courses should include. We used Quality Matters rubric as a start, and this is actually a presentation I should do for that process as well at some point because it's long and intense and was wonderful. But the first year, we talked about the syllabus for the whole year. Eventually, we had a retreat and hammered it out. I think that you guys can imagine that faculty are interested in their syllabi. So eventually, we decided to have a retreat and we hammered it out. It was a great tool, and to implement it, we took it around to all the departments. They loved it and filed it on their desk. They meant to share it, and they likely talked about it a bit, but even though we offered to come to department meetings, similarly to K-12's experience, there's so much to cover in those. So after a few months, we realized we were going to have to do something more for broad implementation. It was just staying on their desks. We asked faculty what motivated them and decided to set up an online course, Best Practices Initiative, called the Golden Paw Award, where faculty were required to follow the rubric and they got various things for it. We are the Lobos, so that's the paw, right, Agile? This award would go with their yearly evaluation. It would give them credentials and distinction, which were the things they said were important to them. The first year, we had 20 recipients across 15 departments and 5 colleges. We were thrilled. Yes. After 5 years, we have almost 150 recipients. It has been a great success. After our successful implementation, having the faculty created rubric and the university implementing a new push for online programs, we decided to give it a try to create an online teaching course for our incoming instructors, even though we still couldn't quite make them go. We did use the items from our research. Online works, so we put it online. Over time, so we built it to last 8 weeks, but eventually we did cut it down to 6 weeks because it was really hard for them to give that much time. It did happen over time, so they could reflect and revisit concepts. And it was highly interactive. They did group activities like a jigsaw, for those of you in K-12, you know what that is, instead of individual readings isolated. They did a video, they had discussions. We had them choose activities they liked in face-to-face and try them online with help from their instructional designer from our team. We had them build their first few modules as they took the class, so they applied what they were learning, their first few modules for their own online class. And because they were actually moving to online and learning concepts they could use, it was meaningful and had continuity to their work. To satisfy convenience, it was set up so that there was only one required synchronous session. So their group that they would be working with inside the course could meet online synchronously at any time that worked for them. And finally, there was an instructor, a leader who got them started, model teaching online as they guided the course, and led them. So this is evolving along with our webinars and our online instructors group to become a community of practice at UNM. Our most recent challenge, like yours, is the university having to move all courses online. They drew on our community of practice as instructors stepped up to help each other. So I think you can imagine how virtual worlds can support these concepts as well. Having community meetings together in a virtual world can enhance the feeling of community that much more. We have great examples of that across our virtual worlds educational community. And early on, as I was teaching at UNM, I gave my students the option of meeting in a web conference or meeting in Second Life. After getting some comfort, after the students got some comfort in Second Life, every single one, amazingly, in spite of how weird they thought it was at first, chose Second Life because they felt like they were actually together. And I should say virtual worlds because I don't think it's just Second Life. They felt like they were actually together, just like we do today, not apart and separated like they did in web conferencing. I know that using these concepts to build PD in a virtual world can work in virtual communities as well. We see it in many of our educational groups. So here's our strategic PD. Online works needs to happen over time so that they can revisit it and reflect on it and work together. It needs to be interactive, highly interactive. Make sure it applies to their work because remember, my teachers left that next day after they were doing stuff and did it with their students and then came back and talked about it. It needs to be meaningful and have continuity. It needs to be convenient, and the leader is important. So here's a quote from our teacher in our study. And she was one of the most cynical getting started. I loved her. Hey, put it online. So thank you, everyone.